Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you sharing your time and the start of a Friday afternoon with us. My name is Chelsea Collier. I'm founder of Digi.City and one of the hosts here today, along with the University of Tampa, this amazing, beautiful space. It is really nice to be here. So I'll go into more about what Digi.City is and kind of my background around smart cities a little bit later, but we have the honor and the privilege of having Mayor Buckhorn here, which is just really amazing. And so want to honor your time, Mayor. And we'll do some quick brief introduction and then excited to see what you have to share with us. So Mayor Buckhorn has a long history of service to the city of Tampa and was elected as the 58th mayor of Tampa, where he leads over 4,300 dedicated, hardworking, and forward-thinking civil servants. In his time in office, Mayor Buckhorn improved on online accessibility for city services and struck a powerful, valuable private-public partnership to provide free Wi-Fi service throughout downtown, incredibly important to smart cities, as we'll get to later. Mayor Buckhorn has made it a priority to focus on public safety, strong neighborhoods, and economic growth, while working diligently to improve the overall quality of life in the Tampa community. Mayor Buckhorn is revolutionizing the way city does business in his one-stop permitting shop, which has streamlined permitting and the regulatory processes and made opening up international markets to Tampa's small business community a priority. It is a great honor to introduce you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I get excited when I'm in the presence of entrepreneurs and particularly this next generation that is now flocking to our city. This is an exciting time for us as a community. And I could not be more excited as I watch the growth of the technology sector, as I watch this city transition itself from an economy that at one point was largely based on service industry to a place now where we've become the destination for the best and the brightest from all over the world. And so for me to have an opportunity to have had some small part in that has been really exciting and really rewarding. I look back 5, 6, 7 years ago when we were trapped in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression, and people basically counted out the state of Florida and certainly counted out the city of Tampa to where we are now, which is by all measures one of the most exciting cities in America that is top of mind for virtually every corporate relocation, top of mind for young talent, intellectual capital, that had been fleeing to places like Charlotte and to Austin and to Raleigh-Durham, but are now coming to Tampa, Florida, and they're bringing their friends with them. I mean, we've seen an amazing growth in this community, not just in terms of construction, although there's been a lot of that, but more importantly, talent. For me as mayor, recruiting intellectual capital to Tampa is absolutely the most important thing I can do, because if talent is here, the jobs will come, and the jobs will be created, and the corporations will move here. I mean, you're already starting to see it. I mean, we're going to have 4,000 new units constructed in downtown Tampa in the next 18 to 24 months. So you think about where we have come from and where we are headed, and the best part is our last chapter has yet to be written. But part of it is because we changed our economic DNA. Part of it is because we recognize that we were not competitive as a community. Part of it is because we came together as a city, not worrying about who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, not doing drama, but focused on the execution of building a great American city. And while we are not there yet, I think we are certainly well on our way, and I think the next 10 years, folks will look back on this time in this city's history and say, this is where the mojo occurred. This is where the magic occurred. This is where the beginning of Tampa's next chapter emerged. And part of that is the technology community and how the city embraces it, but more importantly, how the city celebrates and honors all of you. Part of my job is to get the hell out of your way. My job as government is not to create jobs. My job is to help set the table and allow you all to be successful. Part of that means I have to be an early embracer of technology. Part of that means, and most importantly, as mayor, my single most important job is to use the pulpit that I've been given to create an environment that will allow and encourage entrepreneurs to succeed. I perhaps have the biggest pulpit in the Bay Area. That just comes with being the mayor of Tampa. My job is to talk about it. My job is to embrace it. My job is to celebrate it. My job is to honor those who have been successful and prop up those who try but may not be successful the first time. My job is to be a living, breathing example of someone who may be generations removed from you but who understands the importance of technology, who understands the importance of a digital city, who sets the table for you and other entrepreneurs like you to be successful, and then gets out of the way and gets government out of the way. That's what I can do. Now, as a community, we've tried to be as aggressive as we can in terms of embracing new technology. It's oftentimes difficult. You know, changing that paradigm in government is not easy. We are not as nimble as entrepreneurs are. We are bigger, we are bulkier, we are fatter. We are not as adaptive as we ought to be and what we should be. But I can tell you this, that over time, the governments that are better at it are the governments that are going to win in the competition for intellectual capital. And so when I'm out there talking about what this city looks like, I'm not talking about the old version of Tampa. I'm not talking about the city that competes based on cheap land and cheap labor and cheap taxes. I'm talking about the city where the talent resides, where entrepreneurs are encouraged, where the city is embracing technology that may be disruptive, a la Uber or Lyft, as simple as that may be, but a city that stands up and says, we are willing to take on those old establishments. We are willing to bust up those paradigms. We recognize that there will be wreckage, but at the end of the day, if we don't become early adapters, we will die. We will be like the dinosaurs. And so for those of you in this room that are out there thinking and dreaming of great things and great ideas and great apps and great potential companies, go get them. Go get them. And I can tell you this mayor will get out of your way. But this mayor will also stand with you when you succeed, and we will prop you up when you fail. And failure is inevitable. It happens in your world. What matters is not how you fail. What matters is how you get up. And so for all of you today that are here, congratulations. This is wonderful. But the best is yet to come. What's happening at this university and this entrepreneurial center, what's happening at USF in terms of the commercialization of the research that's taking place out there, what's happening around this country in emerging Sunbelt cities is nothing less than spectacular. I want to win. I hate losing worse than anything in the world. And we're in competition every day. And I'd rather have my teeth pulled out without anesthesia than lose. And so we're going to fight for you. We're going to fight for your companies. We're going to fight for your ideas. We're going to help you succeed. We're going to stand with you and adapt that technology as often as we possibly can, whether it's looking at autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles or some of the things that you heard referenced in terms of the things that we're doing. But the best thing I can do for you is use that pulpit that I've been given to talk about this and to encourage people to be early adapters, and encourage people to be disruptors, and to embrace it and not be scared of it. And use government as a platform and as a petri dish for the ideas that you will create. Tampa's best days are yet to come. I am absolutely convinced of it. And I think you guys are going to be at the forefront of that next generation. And so when my time has come and gone, and when I'm ready to pass that torch to a new generation, it may not be to you, Nikki, but it's going to be to your kids, my kids, and our grandkids. And our job is to leave you all a city that's better than the city that was given to us. So go forth, do well, knock them dead. Don't be afraid of failure. Always get back up. Always recognize that it's darkest before the dawn, but dawn does come. And go be successful, and we will be standing right there with you as we turn this into a digital city and continue to be that city that the best and the brightest in this country want to come and be a part of. We're going to get there. I promise you we're going to get there. And when that day comes and we look back, we're going to say part of it started right here at UT. Right? Where'd she go? Right, Rebecca? Exactly. Part of it started right here at UT, and it was this generation that ushered Tampa into its next iteration. So let's go get it done. You're going to hear from folks who are a lot more important than I am because they're actually out there doing it. I'm largely talking about it. But these are the folks that I think you'll benefit from more than anything. So congratulations. Come down to the mayor's mac and cheese throwdown tomorrow. That's disruptive technology if I've ever seen it. It may be disruptive, but it might be on your stomach. But and come celebrate what is an amazing American city with a very, very, very bright future. So thank you. Thank you to you for the leadership, and let's have a great session. Thanks, everybody.
You know, I've traveled literally all around the world talking and learning and listening about smart cities, and people have asked me, well, why are you here in Tampa? That is why I am here in Tampa. That message and that spirit of leadership as cities transform from a city of the past and embrace technology, innovations, think entrepreneurially, and think of a new way to create a digital economy. I cannot do enough to support it and to cheerlead it, because not every city thinks this way and not every city works this way. Again, my name is Chelsea Collier. Digi.City is a platform that I founded as a response to an Eisenhower Fellowship that I received in early 2016. My background is in economic development. I've worked in state government in Texas. I live in Austin, Texas. Have done technology, worked with a startup, founded a social impact hub in Austin. So I've got the community side, the business side, the entrepreneurship side, the government side. So it allows me to see all of these different perspectives. And when the Eisenhower Fellowship said, okay, what do you want to study? I said, I want to study smart cities, because it takes all of those things and it creates an umbrella around the subject, and it helps cities modernize for the massive changes that are about to come. A question that I used to get that I don't get so much anymore, because smart cities is becoming a much more viable, kind of high-profile topic, but you know, what is a smart city? Depending on who you ask, that can be a very, very different answer. To me, I like to simplify things as much as humanly possible. So to me, a smart city is people on one side and technology on the other side. And the connection between those two sides is how you truly change the world and transform communities. Whether you're talking on the people side and entrepreneurship, I'm so excited to hear what you all have to say. You're such champions of entrepreneurship and technology. On the people side, and you're talking about entrepreneurs, without the right platform in place, you just have a bunch of new businesses, which is cool. I mean, that's great. That's, you know, business runs America in terms of small businesses. But if you put a platform in place and all of the different regional and all the different ecosystem partners come together, then you have an ecosystem, and then you can start to truly transform a community. That platform analogy is exactly the same on the technology side. So in some of the handouts you all have, there's an article I wrote for Inc.com, which has a diagram. There's like a pyramid. And that pyramid is simply meant to, you don't have to read it right now, it's okay, but the pyramid is simply meant to inform that without the platform in place, you have a bunch of devices. They're like paperweights on poles, because there's not a connected ecosystem, there's not a platform. So my job with Digi.City, the job I've created for myself, is essentially to bridge the gap between the public sector and the private sector, between government leaders who are both staff and elected, and the business community, whether it's corporates to startups, universities, everyone in between, nonprofits, incredibly important, where everyone's working together and collaboratively to create the cities that you want to see. So I only say that just as a bit of background to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about here today. But it is my absolute honor to stop talking and start listening, because we have an incredible panel, and I would like for each of you to just go and give a quick introduction. I can certainly introduce you, but I think your perspective and relevant to smart cities and relevant to connected communities and entrepreneurship. So please, thank you.
Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Ooh, it is on. Okay. Hi, everybody. I think I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, but for those of you who don't know, my name is Linda Olsen. I run a nonprofit entrepreneurial support organization in town called Tampa Bay Wave. We are a by entrepreneur, for entrepreneur type of organization started in June of 2008 as really just a peer meetup group for local tech startups. There was about 24 of us who were trying to build our tech startups in Tampa Bay. We're frustrated with some of the gaping gaps at the time in the ecosystem, and felt that sticking together gave us a better chance of success. And we also were committed to staying here. We would often talk about the greener pastures and other places, but our heart and soul was here in Tampa, and we just said Tampa deserves better. Nice. So we were committed to trying to figure this out. Had a great fortune of partnering with several folks in the community, support through University of Tampa and others, that allowed us to get a first federal grant. And so we could actually staff up our organization in March of 2013. Since March of 2013, we've opened not one, but now 2 co-working spaces. One in the heart of downtown Tampa, and a second one we just opened last month in the Channelside District. Okay. Since March of 2013, we've worked with 198 startups, so not quite 200, just in the accelerator and co-working spaces alone. And it's how we relate to like the Digi.City concept is I feel like it's really difficult for certain policies to get pushed through in a community when you don't have a very vibrant, visible tech startup community with tech talent and entrepreneurs. It's kind of hard to sell that to the community and the politicians unless people can see and hear and touch, entrepreneurs and tech startups, whether they're customers, early adopters, or even just the folks themselves who are trying to explore that. So.
Thank you. And Ned Pope with Florida Next.
Yeah, hey, my name is Ned Pope. I am a technology implementation lead for Nielsen and also the volunteer president of the Florida Next Foundation, which works to create opportunities and promote various different tech entrepreneurs around the state and social entrepreneurs to create opportunities and contribute to an innovation economy, which is a model that we believe in. I spent 10 years, a little over 10 years, dating myself here, in technology deployment for state and federal government, mostly consumer-facing platforms where you get paid a very small amount and you have all this press coming at you and elected officials and all that. So, well worth the risk. And why I think that's important to our discussion today is one of the things that I've learned over time, and this is why I really appreciate the public officials that we have here, not just in Tampa, but in the Tampa Bay region through Mayor Buckhorn and also Mayor Kreisman and their respective teams and the counties in both places, is that they really embrace technology and entrepreneurship as a vital part of their local economy and as a necessary incorporation to the growth of those communities. I used to joke around with people, and it's one of those like laugh to keep from crying jokes, so not really a joke, where when I was in state government, I saw a tangible transition from public officials being risk averse to being risk allergic. Truly getting to a point where they were unwilling to try anything, even if it seemed like a no-brainer to the outsider, because they were uncomfortable evaluating the risk involved with technology and entrepreneurship. So although there is risk constantly swirling around public dollars and public entities and public officials, they're comfortable with the risk that comes along with the other things. I think you see that here in Tampa and in Florida as a whole as we start to develop our capital networks here. You see people who are making tremendous investments in real estate buys, which are risky, but they're comfortable evaluating the risk in those things, not willing to make smaller investments in tech and in entrepreneurs. But we're seeing that change a little bit. We're seeing the growth there. There's a tremendous educational component to that. And so I congratulate everyone here who's contributed to that, including Dr. White and others in our community, to make sure that, that our successful founders here who now are transitioning into being funders and are key components of supporting that environment here are starting to educate themselves as to what that's like. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. Dr. Rebecca White, our host here today.
Yes.
Thank you for having us in this
Chelsea.
beautiful space.
And thank you all for coming. This is really exciting for me. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot today, and that's what I'm looking forward to, having this room full of people to discuss this topic. So I'm the director of the Lowe Center, which we're in right now, the John P. Lowe Center for Entrepreneurship here at the University of Tampa, and I'm also the James Walter Chair of Entrepreneurship. and a professor here, and I'm really excited to see what's happening with our city. I came here in 2009, and we were already on our upward trajectory, but it's really been amazing to see, I think, what's happened in the last few years, and thanks to many of the people in this room and on this panel, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. Our students also are a part of it. We have 8,400 students or so that come here every year from around the world. We have 140 countries represented among our student body, and the largest percentage of our students are not from Florida, so we're bringing talent here. And they're immigrating here, and we're trying to keep them here. So a big part of my job is to represent the university and work with the students to help bridge that gap, literally between Tampa, the city of Tampa and the county of Hillsborough and the city of St. Pete and the county of Pinellas, our whole MSA, and keep these students here. So we offer undergraduate and graduate programs. We just launched a new Master of Science in Entrepreneurship, and there's some flyers out there if anybody's interested, but it's a really great program. You can do it in 12 months if you want to, and so it's a pretty cool program. I can tell you more about it. We also offer undergraduate programs in entrepreneurship, and just about 2 weeks ago today, we had our first annual New Venture Forum, and I know a few of you were here, but we showcased 61, Nellie was the planner for that, 61 businesses that we house in the center. So they were about 50 of them were probably student businesses, and the remainder are community businesses that come in to be a part of what we do. The whole center was opened in 2015, and it was built on a learning model built around 5 different learning modalities, from collaboration, coaching and mentoring, reflection, apprenticeship, and multiple practice. So if you're interested in walking around and learning about it, I'd be happy to do that afterwards. But the apprenticeship piece led us to bring in a few businesses from the community. So we do have an opportunity for startups in the community to apply and be here, and a part of the learning process. But we are very different from what Linda and her team does at the Wave. We're preparing the entrepreneurs to hopefully go into the Wave at some point once they've gotten a little bit more advanced. So we're very early stage. We're creating entrepreneurs here more so than companies. So we do have some great companies coming out, but we're about creating entrepreneurial leadership. We're also about doing research that can help us become a smarter city. So when we start to talk, I'll share some of that, but we had a Kauffman Foundation grant to do research this past year, and we did a study which we presented the findings of here in this room, and I can share the white paper with anybody who's interested. But we did address bottlenecks, and we did look at some of the issues, things that we have going well. So my interest in this is that I would like to be part of the group that puts what I call a Fitbit on Tampa Bay. So we want to know more about what's going on with our ecosystem, and that's going to require collecting metrics. So obviously I'm interested in smart technology everywhere, but that's the sort of the goal that I have for what we're doing here.
Fantastic. I'm already so into this conversation. I'm just like chomping at the bit to get started. Lucas Lindsay, who's the co-chair of Launch Florida and also with Domi Station.
Thank you. I'm an urbanist who stumbled my way into startups. So I am now the executive director of a startup program in Tallahassee called Domi. And we help entrepreneurs start companies very similar to the way that the Wave works here locally in the Tampa Bay region. We are building an ecosystem for entrepreneurship up north. We do have more than just the football team up there. We have worked in the last 3 years with over 100 different companies, all very early stage, but people with big goals and big dreams, and we're helping them make that happen. I began my career in urban planning through education and then working in city planning at a local government. I've also worked in state government and DEO and real estate development. But progressively over time, I became more and more interested in people who are taking action to make things happen, who are getting their hands dirty, in really trying to move the needle and move cities forward. And so through that process, I became more and more exposed to entrepreneurs. and people working in civic tech at the intersection of city planning and entrepreneurship. And those are the people that inspire me and the people that I wanted to work with. So I'm on a path to try to work with those folks. And then over the last year or two in working at DOMI, I often felt that I was sort of in the wilderness up in Tallahassee, and there weren't a lot of people who spoke the language I spoke, who weren't necessarily doing the same type of ecosystem development work. And I realized that I and many others needed a network of people who understood what we were doing so we could share best practices and try to work on those problems collectively. So I came together with a group of people, including Linda and Ned, and we started Launch Florida, which is a statewide coalition of entrepreneur support organizations and programs. We have our 2017 summit next month in Orlando, bringing together over 50 folks who are working in tech and entrepreneurship from all around the state. We're trying to move the needle forward for Florida as a whole and make sure that the state recognizes the importance of entrepreneurship and technology as a viable path for economic development and is future-proofing the state because we are not future-proofed. And so that is what I've been working on. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you all.
Fantastic. I just want to take a second to kind of acknowledge how exciting and how impressive this is. This doesn't happen every single day. To have this caliber of champion and smart city and entrepreneur champion with experience in economic development, public sector, private sector, and just showing up to create a city that you want to see in a region that you want to see. So I just really want to acknowledge and thank you for the work that you do. Okay, so let's ground the conversation just to make sure we're kind of all starting in a level playing field. What does smart city mean for Tampa? Like, what are the key priorities for Tampa when it comes to innovation, entrepreneurship, and smart cities? And I'll let anybody go. I don't want to dictate the conversation. This is just a conversation between friends. So
Well,
anybody
to
who
keep
wants
this
to
from
jump
being
in.
a chronological sort of left to right order, I think what it means to me is looking into the future and then understanding there are a lot of steps that need to happen between now and then that need to start now in order for us to realize that vision of the future. Whenever we roll out a project at Nielsen, they're typically large in scale, and same thing with state governments. Sometimes they take even longer because you're dealing with legislative cycles and things of that nature. And so you really have to start looking years in advance and then reverse engineer the process that gets you to that point. If you do that, a lot of times you'll start to generate interest in the form of partners and people that can actually streamline it. So you may actually exceed your expectations down the road. But far too often, folks think that the talking point is the result. That as long as you're hitting the talking point and you're projecting an awareness of something that's important, that's all you really need to do. You need to make sure that it's out there. And I think we're very fortunate to be in this region where we see proactive public leadership, proactive corporate leadership, that and college and university leadership, obviously, that supports that groundswell of entrepreneurs. Because in the tech sector, specifically in the entrepreneurship sector, the way you get things done at that level is to put your damn head down and do the work, right? There's got to be folks looking for you to prop you up and to give you those opportunities. Because an entrepreneur, if they want to be successful, they're going to stay locked in their box, pushing for the outcome that they want to receive. And I think having that mentality at a broader scale and at the public sector level is vitally important. And we're seeing the seeds of that here in Tampa.
Thank you for framing that. And the mayor alluded to this a little bit, and I hear it all the time. Government moves slow, entrepreneur and private sector moves fast, and both of those are okay as long as there's a feedback loop and there's conversation. And even to begin talking about the policy, you really have to start educating people about what the future will look like 4 and 5 years in advance. And it'll be a very different world than we are in today. So thank you for that framework.
I'd like to take a stab at a similar, but I have a slightly different viewpoint on it, right? So I don't think it's a goal of a city to have a reputation as being just a smart city and a digital city just for the sake of being smart or digital, right? You have to, I think, frame it in such a way so that you can translate the benefit to the citizens that are here. Why? Why would it matter, right? we often are, I say we, the WAVE community, right? We're trying to, I always say like it looks like I work with startups and entrepreneurs and co-working and events and all these things and community building, but I feel like at the end of the day, my biggest job is changing the hearts and minds of folks here so that they're willing to adopt and embrace technology, because if we can adopt and embrace technology, and it starts sometimes with the leadership at the public sector, when you have cities and mayors and other people willing to visibly adopt this technology so that it gives other people comfort to do that as well. But if we can have that culture change here in this region where technology isn't scary, risky, that we have the ability to really be an innovation-driven economy here in the region, that helps me help these startups find those critical early adopters and potentially the capital and everything they need to grow and thrive, and thus create a robust economy that benefits us all.
Well, I'm going to steal a phrase from someone in our earlier conversation. Technology is a tool, right? It's an enabler. And thank you for bringing up the why piece of it, because at the end of the day, why do you need technology embedded in the connectivity piece there? Because you want a cleaner, greener, safer, more accessible city where there's greater equity between residents. We have major challenges in every city across the United States and across the world. Technology has the potential to bridge that gap. So thank you for making that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Rebecca.
just follow up on what you just said, because that's, I learn a lot from our students. And, I mentioned Nellie. She stepped out. I think she had class, but she's from Finland. And so, we learn a lot from our international students that come here, where some of these cities have sort of leapfrogged us. And, I think I clearly am in the camp that technology is a tool, and that it is about people at the end of the day. And so I think to be a smart city, it's about opening up our mind to thinking about what we need to do to be innovative and creative and solve problems. And technology just happens to be the best way to solve problems a lot of times, in the cleanest way and the best way. But I think it's, the other thing is the young people that I see that trying to keep them here, they want that kind of a city. That's where they want to live. So if we want to have a future, we have to allow for that. And I think it means making this a city where our kids want to stay. And I know I've heard the mayor say that passionately. And I moved here without my children. I left them up north. They were in college, but they've now followed me here. So I have even more passion for what we're doing. So, it's about people. I mean, technology is a tool, like you said, and I think that's what we've got to think about, is what do we need to do to attract and solve our problems. And if you look at something like transportation, we get into a frame of mind of thinking it's about, creating these big infrastructure projects that do take 50 years. But then all of a sudden Uber shows up, and suddenly we've got a different solution to public transportation. So it's not, I don't think the solutions have to be 50 years out. I think we have to think more innovatively about how to get it done now. Like you said, put your head down and get it done now.
Great point. Lucas, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, and we've kind of been touched on a little bit, is bridging the divide between public and private, right? And having the conversation. And it is, while I agree with Ned that entrepreneurs have to be locked in the room at some times doing the work to get things done. There has to be a platform process for a conversation where people are reaching out back and forth. And for that entrepreneur, it becomes even a form of civic engagement and involvement, to help move their city forward. So I think that the city itself needs processes and people empowered to go out at a grassroots level and get out there and meet people. So for example, in my community, there are city planners who come to our startup events. There are city staff. The mayor's office in Tallahassee, Mayor Gillum, has done a good job of empowering people to make that happen. But it's not just one way. Like, I've learned over time that I gain quite a bit of benefit by sitting down with that staff and explaining and proactively telling them about the things that I'm seeing in the community. And if I reach out to do that, then they're willing to listen. But I think sometimes entrepreneurs don't reach out and then they assume like, oh, it's a big bureaucratic machine and no one's listening to me. But you do have to put in time and work to build relationships, like you would have to do if you were lobbying for anything at a civic level. And I think that that is the way, and what I love about it is that is the way the millennials can get involved in politics, local government, and again, civic engagement. So both parties need to have empathy for each other and reach out, but it also helps quite a bit to have empowered brokers. And I would consider people like Dr. White and Linda and their programs to be brokers, touch points that the city can interface with, and then by that spread into 61 companies at once through their email list server, whatever it is, you know what I mean? So both staff reach out, but also that broker in the middle matters quite a bit.
5 or 6 years ago, I joked that there is no easier way to clear a room of entrepreneurs than to walk in and start talking about tech policy. Everyone just really heads for the door. But that has changed. And I think, the sharing economy, ride sharing, our connections to our mobile phones, I'd hold it up, but it's somewhere else in the room. That's starting to change that because technology is now relevant in our lives. And we can have all the technology in the world, and it's what we do with it that matters. So speaking of examples, I've had the chance to explore a little bit about what's happening in Tampa, and it's very exciting, modernizing the bus system, the lighting systems here. I think you're one of the very first communities who's integrating Waze into the transportation network, which is really kind of incredible. And I know there's a lot more happening, so just invite you all to talk very specific examples about smart city initiatives that are happening here.
So obviously the most visible, most recent example of that is the Tesla program. So we got either 4 or 5, don't quote me on the number, Kevin, of cars that we got here, but that really is a pilot program for the entire world. We are the first city that has received not only fully electric vehicles to be utilized as the first mile, last mile portion of the transit system here in Tampa, but they are also fully equipped with autonomous ride technology, all right? So that's not legal here yet, but the second it is, in other words, we already have the system and processes and equipment in place to literally flip a switch and have an autonomous vehicle come and pick somebody up. And that first mile, last mile is, to me, the biggest piece to an overall transition in your public transit infrastructure. If you can't connect people that are several miles away from a bus stop or a transit center to those locations easily, you think about how much it rains in Florida, and various other obstacles to get places, then you're limiting that person's ability to grow, you're limiting that person's ability for sustainable employment, to improve their situation, or just live a good quality of life, right? So I live in South Tampa, right off of South Howard, and we even struggle with the spacing of bus stops to the point where it's not realistic for me to take the bus, even though I'm adamantly trying to do it from time to time. We also run into situations here where you have buses that take a long time to go a short distance because they have so many multiple stops, right? And so I think that that's an area where it can be helpful. Those of us that work in the downtown area, we've utilized the Downtowner. It's basically a free version of Uber, minus the air conditioning, which is a challenge. But it's one of these things where it's a good problem to have. Right now, if you called a Downtowner, it would take you 30 minutes to get picked up because the demand is exceeding the supply, right? So that's the challenge you have after you test something and it's market validated. Well, how do we get the next 5 Tesla vehicles? I imagine with only 4 of them circulating in the university area, they're going to get a lot of usage and it's going to be harder to get them. So I think having those public officials that are looking down the road, that are seeing, we're going to need 20 or 100 of these things pretty soon. And how do we face those challenges? I think that that's vitally important. So that's just one example of how that works. Having a little inside baseball information on that too, that idea came to fruition 8 months ago. I was in band practice. I'm a co-owner of a record label, hence the stupid hair. And don't judge me, just don't judge me.
It's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah, total judgment-free zone.
stupid hair.
And I got a call from my man, Cesar Hernandez. And Caesar is somebody that whenever he reaches out to me, even if it's just to say what's up, I answer because I know this dude is 100% legit. So I answer and we BS around for a few minutes and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? We're in band practice this evening. What's going on? He said, man, I got the Tesla GM to agree to bring these vehicles to be part of the HART transportation system. For those of you who don't know Caesar, he is the government affairs director for HART, right? But he was relatively new in the position, so he still hadn't figured out how to like make tangible things happen yet. He's just tossing ideas and chasing stuff, right? I think he's probably 28, 29, yeah. So Sear calls me and we start talking around and we start throwing out some ideas of some people that can help. Basically, in about 4 months, he raised a private sector funding from people who just believed in this, didn't have any direct connection to public transit, and got enough funding to justify the government matches to making it happen. It wasn't like a bunch of public officials in the room saying, here's a ballot initiative that's gonna take 9 months to implement and a penny sales tax, et cetera, et cetera. We can get things done that way too, but there are other alternative ways, and I think the way that government works now and needs to work in smart cities is that the citizens need to understand, y'all can make any of these things happen, all right? Government is not in a position right now to be the lead, but they love to follow when they know that they have a little bit of support at the ground level. You get that first 25K or that first 50 committed from private sector sponsors, you'd be surprised how easy it is to get public funding and to get folks behind your initiative to make it become a reality. And that became a reality from the idea stage to where it is now, a real initiative that's happening in less than a year with one person who saw the vision and was passionate about it.
Yeah,
And
when
so I
it
give him a
says
lot of credit.
He deserves a lot of credit, and it takes the champion, right, to take an idea and say, aha, I know a way that this could be improved. And not that it's easy, it's not one phone call and it's done, but it says a lot about the economic and political environment that I'm going to use a farming analogy here, which is going to be kind of funny, but it's fertile soil. Right, and it doesn't happen overnight, but if you keep trying hard enough and if the idea or the initiative is in service of residents and citizens and truly makes a city smarter, more connected, and better, then there's no reason why it can't happen. But it's the public policy piece that needs to embrace that I think is incredible and should be applauded. Yeah, Lucas.
Well, what I think was cool about this example is it creates kind of like an operational model for getting things done in smart cities, right? And it's sort of analogous to use kind of a cheap analogy, to like the lean startup model. Yeah. It's a lean government type of model where you're testing these things and finding that minimum product up front and then getting that momentum behind it. You know, the same way that you would build an organization, like Linda was talking about how they started as a meetup group. They test bedded that and tried to find if there was even demand. Domi started as a meetup group. It's a pretty common model across the state to see these major nonprofit ecosystem building organizations start that way, or these types of smart cities projects. And what's Ned's saying about Tampa being a pilot program for the world, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, transportation in particular is rife with problems and is one of the most pervasive problems for people running cities all around the world. All major transportation networks in big cities are past their useful life. The BART in San Francisco, you know, they're constantly on maintenance. People are frustrated. New York just talked about potentially having to shut down certain segments for maintenance. Penn Station in Philadelphia talked about having to shut down for maintenance. There's a variety of huge pervasive problems coming. And so to the extent that we can pilot some of these programs with partnerships, I think that's the way to get started.
Well, and let's futurecast a little bit, you know, thinking about what things will look like and some of the huge challenges that cities have right now. You know, cities are being asked to do more with less. And budgets are shrinking and needs are expanding, so that's never a very comfortable place to be. But that's when you have to start thinking about efficiency and effectiveness. And, you know, I have really the privilege of going to some really nerdy conferences. I mean, this is like my crew, you know, we're the community builders and entrepreneurs and all of you here today. I feel very at home, and then I'll go to an IoT conference and wow, I feel really out of place, but very inspired, because what I learned from those subject matter experts in 4 or 5 years, almost every single inanimate object, water bottles, devices in our homes, computers and cell phones, of course, but everything in a home, in a building, on a street, in a city, all of that will be connected. That's the Internet of Things, or IoT. That is the way the world is going. And I'm excited about the conversation that we're having here because I know that Tampa's ready for that. I know that Tampa's thinking about that, and it's why I'm here to cheerlead and champion those kinds of efforts. Not every city is ready for that, and a lot of cities and communities have a lot of fear around that. The piece and the policy piece, and I'm so glad you brought it up, is that in order to have all of that work, so IoT and the cloud and all the sensors and gadgets that are collecting information and then collect information and data to help cities and communities make smarter decisions, none of that works without the base of the pyramid. So in that Inc. article, the pyramid I keep referring to, which is the infrastructure layer. Infrastructure is essentially communication and power. So we're talking about high-speed internet, mobile and fiber, and Wi-Fi, everything in between, and it's this great ecosystem. And without that ground level piece of it, again, it's just paperweights on poles. None of this stuff works unless that part is in place. So today we run on a 4G network, and 5G and IoT, it's like lots of letters and numbers. That is what is coming in 4 or 5 years, and make no mistake about it, the world would be very different. So I just want to kind of open that up to the panel. I know we've talked about Tesla. Essentially Tesla will be using a lot of that bandwidth in the 5G world, and certainly now in the 4G world. So if you all want to kind of talk about that in terms of examples or things that Tampa's doing to get ready on any sort of level and on the infrastructure level. Lucas? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I don't know the specific example for Tampa, but I know, for example, for future casting, the kind of decentralized mesh network that you're talking about, where devices and buildings and businesses are starting to talk to each other, is incredibly exciting. Yeah. I have a friend who works at IDEO Cambridge, in the Boston area, and he's working on a mesh system called Nomad. And for example, their coffee pot is connected through kind of a pilot project with a coffee shop just down the block. And so when it gets low or old at their shop or at their office, the shop gets an alert to make people maybe coming down for a fresh cup of coffee. They're also working with that coffee shop to create demand and product-based pricing. So the coffee shops machines are connected through this Nomad project, and as the coffee gets older and older, the coffee shop auto tweets out bigger and bigger discounts on cups of coffee. Cool. So 2 hours old, 20%, 3 hours old, 30%, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, there's incredible things happening. But when I think about Tampa, there are also, in the urban and redevelopment space, so much opportunity to test bed and pilot some of these types of networks, whether it's 5G, connected devices, whatever. So you have the waterfront development and people like Jeff Vennick taking a lead there. Tampa Bay Innovation Partnership, which is doing cool stuff in a place-based, zone-based area where you can start to pilot things. Those people are all looking for partnerships. They're all looking for wins to make things happen. Now, how would you ever talk to Jeff Vennick about that redevelopment? Well, it just so happens that because there's an ecosystem for entrepreneurs developing, there are organizations like Tampa Bay Wave who have partnerships with large-scale organizations like the Lightning and others. So, that's all part of the infrastructure too, by the way, and that's something that we could probably talk a little bit about. Yeah. But the infrastructure of entrepreneur support programs and things that help enable all that as well.
What's interesting, so I was just part of a conversation a couple of days ago, and they talk about, if you look at the Tampa Bay region, the numbers they talk about are 4 million people living here, right? This is a big region. And if you're not really familiar with the geographic layout, I mean, most of us are, it's really not unheard of for it to take an hour to connect to different hubs within the community. Yeah. And when you have to, because we don't have mass transit options and things like that, when you don't have good mass transit options, it's really difficult to solve some of those social issues that we talked about, right? The conversation I was was part of, they were talking about people who are in, Hernando County and Polk County and other parts that are connected to us who don't have an option to even get to good jobs because they may not have the right mass transit, or, you know, they have a car that is, you know, one, you know, flat tire away from actually helping them lose their job, whatever job they might have, right? I think Tampa Bay is actually set up to be a really great place because we have to solve some of these issues. We have to solve the transportation issues, but also because of the geographic layout, like, can we solve some of these employment issues by using technology to employ people so they don't even have to rely so much on transportation to get to good paying jobs? I think we have an opportunity as a community to really explore some of these options because we need to and because we have to. We can't be a vibrant community if only a certain subset of our community is doing well and we're not taking care of all of the citizens.
Yeah, and that's my great belief, is that tech is the equalizer. And Brookings just did a report that from 2013 to 2015, half of all the jobs created in the U.S. were in tech. That's incredibly exciting. And that alone is pretty exciting. But not only were they created in tech, for every one job that's created, there's an overflow of 5 jobs. So take that and multiply it times 5. And then we start to really get exciting in terms of how communities can transform. And you don't have to go down one path and then stay stuck in that path. As long as you have access to technology, you can do anything in the world. And you know, I personally don't ever want to learn to code. I'm going to keep doing what I do, but I could if I really wanted to. I could take an 8-week course from any university anywhere in the world. It might be University of Tampa, and learn an entirely different skill that can put me in an entirely different career path. So I think that's incredibly exciting. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to
Yeah,
jump on
well,
that?
and that part's vital. I mean, you have to be looking ahead for workforce development to make sure tech is, there's a lot of great opportunity for tech, but it is also true that some people can get left behind. And in our economy, as we've seen, there is a growing divide between urban, rural, even suburban and urban. And you know, we need to make sure that we are including everyone in that future. And workforce development programs that are more employer and demand-based, short-term, that you can spin out faster and update faster, are absolutely vital to making sure that you can participate in the smart city.
And you connect the dots too. Again, everybody benefits when the region's economy is thriving and growing, right? And you talked about not just helping create entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurial leaders, right? I think we need that kind of leadership in this community to help connect these dots. If we have a vibrant tech ecosystem and the entrepreneurs are not leading it, you're not going to move the needle quite as fast as if you have leaders within the entrepreneurial organization who are thinking about these bigger impact items as they're trying to build and grow their companies here. We want to be a city or a region that can compete with other communities in the country and around the world. So by default, we have to be thinking this way. And so I'm so glad that we are in a community that is thinking not just about how to have a couple great startups, but really how to make sure that our community is full of the leaders in the region who are building these great companies that are inspiring others and helping drive the policies that will allow us to be a digital city in the future.
Dr. White?
Well, one of the things I was going to comment on, I agree with all of these, and especially when Linda's talking about our geography and some of our history. I think we have a history here. I was in Cincinnati before, and we had a river that divided Kentucky and Ohio, so it's kind of similar here. We have this big bay in the middle, and it's led to some infrastructure issues and some communication and some lack of collaboration and other things like that. But the fact that we haven't solved them with 19th or 20th century solutions is kind of cool, because, as Linda said, we've got to solve them. And so we get to look to leapfrog all of that in a lot of ways. And that's, I mentioned my students from other parts of the world, a lot of European cities, they leapfrogged us in many ways. So I think it's an opportunity. That when I moved here, what I saw was amazing opportunity. The other thing I would say is that as far as a smart city goes and government, I believe that entrepreneurial ecosystems and this innovation has to be driven by the entrepreneurs. And but what's so powerful is that we have a mayor and other leadership who will be willing to use that. You know, strong ecosystems require not only entrepreneurs and new technologies, but they also need people to buy from them and to test and use the products. So, you know, that's where, in my mind, the government can really provide support. It's a real different private-public partnership model than we used to have. And I think most entrepreneurs and most entrepreneurial support organizations are looking less and less to government to fund them and more to government to be a partner and a purchaser of their products.
And lay the
So
platform.
that to me is, you know, that's our new platform, and that's one of the things that I think makes this city ready. And then the other thing I would say, Jeff Vinnick's name has come up, and he's one of many, but there's some money and there's some support, and there are people here that want to see this happen, and they're not all obvious like Jeff Vinnick. And that's kind of the research that I'm interested in is, at the next level, is kind of uncovering some of the connections to some of the people that we don't know about that are here, and trying to get them engaged in, you know, thinking meaningfully about how we do that.
I had a cool experience this morning. Thanks for being here. As I'm kind of walking around downtown, and I walk into a coffee shop, and right next door is this natural grocery store called Duckweed. So I go into Duckweed, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I've like got one of the best Americanos I've ever had in my entire life in my hand. It's really amazing, just right there on the corner. I'm sad I can't remember the name of the shop. Thank you. Yeah, it was incredible. Obviously, I picked
We're
a good
well
one.
caffeinated,
Yeah,
right?
good, cool. And I walked in there, and I said, oh, that's cool, like new kind of section coming soon. And she says, oh yeah, because we're an incubator for companies who come in here, and they may start off here, and then they'll go do a truck, and then they'll do their own brick and mortar. And I mean, we just talked for 15 minutes about how she's championing startups and championing small businesses within a grocery store. Then I walked down the street to Moxie and had breakfast there this morning, and there's signage everywhere about download our app or do something with our app, and you can order ahead of time and go in front of the line. And I'm like, holy cow. I mean, some cities say we're an entrepreneur kind of hub, and it all stays locked away in tech. And I love tech, no bashing there. But when you have the spirit of entrepreneurship that exists in tech and in a university and in a city hall and in the downtown on the retail side and in the kind of bricks and mortar of what makes a city, I mean, that's something pretty unique and pretty special, and I think just a really great roadmap and a model for other cities. So.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did you expect that? I mean, what
No.
did you expect when you came to Tampa? Because I think that's been one of our challenges. We feel like maybe maybe we don't do a good job of telling our story, and maybe other people outside of this region don't see that. So I'm always curious as to what people expect when they come to Tampa.
Well, I knew it was possible just because I understand the leadership in this community, what Mayor Buckhorn is doing and what you are all doing. That sets the stage. I mean, that's kind of the key, that something very special is happening, and honestly, it's why I'm here, to listen and learn and explore, and then it's my job to tell the story, because quite selfishly, I mean, yes, I want to help you all because now I feel like we're friends, and Tampa's like home away from home. But I want to use what you all are doing very organically as an example to cities around the country and cities around the world, because not everybody does this as authentically and naturally as you do. And, you know, I come from a world of economic development, and I get it. Cities compete for jobs and employers, really smart cities, not the connected smart cities, but smart cities grow their own jobs at the same time that they're competing for employer-based companies. Competition is cool. I mean, the mayor says, I hate to lose, and I really hate to lose. I want to be a more gracious loser, but I really don't. But that piece of growing from within and then helping everybody rise. So then you can not just start thinking about who we are as a city, but who we are as a region, who we are as a state, how states connect to each other and become regions, and how that benefits the U.S. as a whole. That's the ultimate goal, and I think possible with technology and the smart city movement.
You mentioned Waze, all right? Everybody uses Google Maps. Why the heck you need Waze, right? Waze was the first way to crowdsource traffic. So Google has always had the ability for you to see the little red line on the road, and you can say, oh, I need to figure something out, right? But the red line, especially 10 years ago, it used to come when you were in this. Like, oh yeah, no, there's traffic, like I'm stuck. So Waze came about. It was a group of entrepreneurs from a city right outside of Tel Aviv, and it was a way for them to use Google's API map to create their own open source mapping application, so the 10 of them could communicate what was going on with the traffic, because there were 3 ways to get into the heart of the city. And they used that Waze term to build the entire application around that. And they got acquired 2 years ago by Google for $1 billion, right? So how do we collectively as a group and working with the citizenship and also public entities and corporate entities to say, let's start looking way enough into the future where it doesn't have to be a crisis to justify these technological innovations? Because that's what happens a lot. When I was working in government deploying technology, every single program I ever had was an economic crisis. Foreclosure relief, oh my God. 100-year high in foreclosure filings in Florida. We got to find a way to process these cases easier and better for the citizens. Hurricane insurance in 2004, 2005. That was my first job, trying to figure out how we process a 100-year high in claims, because we had 4 hurricanes hit the state all at once and all the insurers took off, right? So that's good that we're looking at technology as the tool and understanding that the people are still the ones providing the solution. But I'm always going to be that dude that's banging on the table, say it's cool to pat yourself on the back, spend the next half of your conversation on how do we keep this from happening the next time? How do we look into the future with foresight to make sure it doesn't require a crisis level occurrence in order for us to get together and start being innovative and start investing in our technology entrepreneurs here?
No better way to see that in action than in transportation. And again, I live in Austin. I love my city. It's a great place to be in, and the traffic will just drive you to drink. Well, wait, those two things shouldn't belong together. Please forget I said that. No, but it's really, really frustrating.
After your trip.
When you're home on the front porch, yeah. But it's that because the city didn't invest in infrastructure. They couldn't see who they would be 10 years ahead of time, and now everyone is rallying around, boy, what are all the solutions that we can have in place? And you know, there's the old way of thinking and then very new innovative ways of thinking. We're even talking about putting gondolas up over city buildings, which is kind of cool.
Well, the conversation has come up here.
Okay, good.
Multiple times.
I think it's worth exploring.
It is.
Lucas.
Always worth it.
Yeah, well, strategically too, for entrepreneurs, I would say, don't let the crises go to waste. So the other side of that is that those are opportunities, huge opportunities. And if you're not in place with a plan and the relationships and then ready, then it's going to pass you by.
I thought we
So
were friends, dude. Just kidding. No, you're absolutely right.
You got to be opportunistic. You got to put resources to your disposal. And, you know, for example, back in Tallahassee, there was recently someone wrote an op-ed, I'm not going to name names, wrote an op-ed about sort of anemic job growth. And immediately a couple of local politicians reached out, angry that he wrote it, but then also saying, so what's the answer? What are we going to do? I could allocate, what if I could give you $1 million right now? What would you even do? No answer. You got to have an answer if you're going to do that. And if you have an answer, maybe you can manufacture a crisis using an op-ed. So you got to think about it that way as well.
But the truth of the matter is, you're not going to have a crystal ball to know what those crises are that are coming down the pipeline, right? What you have to do, though, is invest in having that entrepreneurial mindset, the innovative mindset, and I like to say, make technology really visible and innovation really visible, so that it helps foster that spirit of innovation and creativity, so that we're ready for that next crisis.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is a diversification of perspectives. Is that making sure that people who have a tunnel vision on their role and their job and the things that they need to accomplish on a week-to-week basis are not the only ones that are contributing to the conversation.
Silos are so 10 years ago. or at least we hope so. So we're talking a lot about the things that are working really well in Tampa and the Bay Area. What are some of the barriers? If you had a magic wand and you could cite one barrier and then you have the magical solution, what barrier would you want to overcome?
I'll just start this. I actually pulled up part of the white paper because I thought it would be good. We could throw these out. You know, some people will agree with them or not. But we looked at, through this Kaufman study, we brought in some scholars that had developed this on a worldwide basis, really, this whole model around bottlenecks and understanding what the bottlenecks were. And the things that came out of our research included a lack of vision and a lack of collaboration among certain groups. And, you know, that was, you know, I think that, again, the Bay can be really big here sometimes, and that's history. I think we're really overcoming a lot of that, but I think that's been one of the bottlenecks among the ecosystem. Lack of a strong urban core, and what we really saw was that there are a number of strong growth areas, but it's not like a city where you have everything consolidated. So it leads to, when you think of the traditional ecosystem, it leads to some challenges. Maybe there's an opportunity there that, you know, you don't think about because it's a unique setup. A lack of actionable direction on public transit. We've already talked about that a lot. Limited buyers for entrepreneurs' products. So that's an issue here. I was in Cincinnati before, and we had a lot of corporate headquarters. And P&G was the reason, for example, many of those entrepreneurs could exist. We don't have that here. So again, if we can get our government and some of our other local companies to buy more. Talent, the difficulty getting our story out via the news media in particular. That came up quite a bit from entrepreneurs, both locally, but also out here, outside of this region, people not having sort of a general understanding of what Tampa really has to offer, and having a perception that we're still kind of a city of a bunch of retirees, you know, and not really knowing the facts about that. And a lack of coding skills, which Iron Yard is really stepping in to make a change there, and Tony's here, I think, somewhere. There she is, yeah. But I think there's, you know, there's some other cool things. I hear there's a new cybersecurity boot camp that's coming up, and so some other cool things. Lack of CEO leadership skills. So again, we're trying to step in and do more of that. And then finally, a lack of funding for early stage companies, especially those who need more than $1 million. And in that respect, you know, I think there's some work that we can do, again, back to the connectivity, finding some of those deal makers, and that's kind of an area of research I'm really interested in, finding people that we don't know are here that have deep experience from around the world maybe in certain verticals and kind of get them engaged. So those are the things that we found. There's probably others, but I just thought I'd throw those out since we did that research.
And you know, it's one tiny little thing at a time that creates a major movement. So you know, what you all are doing to build the ecosystem is part of what eventually a VC says, you know, I keep hearing about Tampa. There's something happening down there, and the money comes from each of the coasts because they want to be where it's all emerging and growing. So Lucas, I don't know if you have any experience with that, with some of the conversations you have.
Well, I would just
in
say
your world.
that in many ways, Tampa's sort of this microcosm for the entire state. And Florida as a whole feels that way. It's like we have all these pieces, we have all these things, they're just not fitting together somehow. You know, we're the third largest state in the union, but when is the last time you heard the governor stand up and release our innovation numbers, not just job numbers, or our venture capital numbers? Well, you don't, because they're terrible. They're abysmal in relation to
16th in the country in 2016.
Yeah, 16th in the country. Exactly.
SBIR grants, no, limited.
We could go all day on this because we live in this world, but the numbers do not look good. We are underperforming.
Sounds like a crisis that could be an opportunity.
Well, exactly, but the state needs to do better, you know, and future casting. We cannot have an economy based on service jobs and tourism and climate in a world of climate change, you know. So we need leaders who are going to stand up and talk about that at a statewide level. And we also need organizations that are working on that. And by the way, there are dozens and dozens of ecosystem builders in every major community of Florida. There are people doing this work. Those people need to be empowered too. That's part of the infrastructure that the state has to invest in. You know, there's a big conversation right now about what is economic development in Florida going to be in the future. You can say what you want about Enterprise Florida. I have my own opinions. My major opinion, though, is that the state basically does nothing to invest in entrepreneurship. They have Florida Institute for Commercialization and a few other things that play at the margins. But really, for a substantive economic development policy based on investing in entrepreneurs, it's kind of a barren wasteland. And people are doing it at a grassroots level, but
Then it's time to rinse and repeat the model that we talked about earlier, right? Which is the local champion saying, okay, city government or regional government, here's what we want to see and here are the policies in place that we want to drive that. So then it goes up to the state level, and the local, state, and federal collaboration and cooperation is incredibly important because everyone has something to give,
Let's use
especially
Tampa as the
relative to the
example.
smart city conversation. Yeah.
To Lucas's point, one of the things that all the university leaders in entrepreneurship recognized was this very issue, that there is actually a lot going on around the state in a lot of pockets, but if we just take the universities, there's a lot of stuff going on, but nobody's consolidating that and telling that story. So we did form about a year ago a group of educators, and we're really working to try to consolidate what's going on. And I mean, it includes UF and USF and FSU and all the schools. I mean, we've got about 25 schools. So, you know, all the major research schools and a number of the privates. And we're really trying to at least get that story put together. And if we can hand it to somebody, hopefully they'll tell it. But it's you know, we're a diverse state in many ways. And part of that's geography. And, you know, there's a lot going. I mean, if you look at cities, Miami tends to have the numbers, you know, that show up in terms of growth. And again, there's a lot of that in this white paper I can share. But when you look at when you actually look at progress over the last year or 2 years, Tampa is way up there. You know, it's
Getting
really doing
recognized
some cool
for it. I
things.
mean, a nice article in Forbes and some really exciting
Right.
listings on some national.
Tampapreneurs, was that what it was?
Great article. Oh, and by the way, happy to share any of the links to things that we're talking about here today. I'll gather that from you
Yeah, I'll
all
get you a
and-
link to the white paper.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So I'm conscious of time and want to make sure that we have enough time for questions. I know we've been talking about what I think are some pretty exciting and very, very cool things, but want to hear from you all about questions or thoughts and ideas. And there's a mic right in the middle of the room. Anything around entrepreneurship, innovation, public-private partnerships, smart cities, questions? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stan Schultes. I'm with Spark Growth. I work on innovation districts and smart cities. I'm doing some work in Florida, some domestically, and some internationally. I was recently at Harvard. They had a Smart Cities Innovation Accelerator, and there was about 20 of the leading smart city development projects going on. And you guys, so there was a lot of discussion about what works, what doesn't work. These are the folks who are kind of ahead. You guys hit the nail on the head for the why, and that's the citizen. The people out there that we're trying to benefit from smart cities projects. One of the things that is really important is that the citizen has got a sensor right here. I mean, the citizen becomes the sensor. So there's an awful lot that goes on, and there's also an intelligent filter between what the citizen sees and what goes back to the city. I think the second point, and I haven't heard anybody address this yet, and I know there's nobody from the city on the panel, is kind of the what. And one of the most important things that's been identified by the cities that are ahead right now is having an open data platform. So Dr. White was talking about, that the government owns the infrastructure. Well, there's lots and lots of sensors out there, and they're collecting lots and lots of data. That data needs to be made available. And not just the data that makes you look good, but all the data. And the real point behind that then is that you want to enable startups, entrepreneurs, to build applications that take advantage of that data. Having to collect that data themselves, partnering with people like Waze who's collecting data is great. But the city itself has lots of data that needs to go out there. So I'd like to hear, some ideas about, what we might do in terms of building an open data platform, and how that would work here in Tampa.
Thank you. That is an excellent point and great questions. I have lots of thoughts on that, but I want to listen to what the panel has to say first. Lucas.
Well, first of all, I agree that public data should be public. And so we need to build that out. Yes, I would also say that if you want to look for examples, there are great examples in Florida. So Orlando is doing a really good job and has built an open data platform, which all of you could go check out if you Google it. They have also, that's tasked through their city in terms of kind of the administrative pipes of it. They created an innovation director that's under the mayor's office in their city, similar to what San Francisco and other folks have done. And he's tasked with resources and team to build out, and developers to build out an open data platform. There's a guy named Matt Brofman, if you want to check him out. He might have good examples on how to make it happen. At a smaller scale in Tallahassee, we did a civic tech hackathon in partnership with local government. They opened up all of the parks and trails data to developers, and we did a 36-hour hackathon at our facility, and folks built apps on top of that. They provided prize funding for the top 3 winners, cash, which is rare in this world, but awesome to have. And there was a lot of interest around that. It was called Trail Hacks, but I'm pretty bullish on using things like civic hackathons and whatnot as launching points for those initiatives. But.
Thank you for that.
I think utilizing mobile device automation of services, and I'm not talking about the services that replace individuals. I mean, obviously that's a sensitive topic that will continue to be debated for a while, but I'm talking about the services that require you to fill out a paper form and mail something in, or wait in a line at the DMV for hours and hours to achieve something.
The efficiency and the convenience piece of it.
Exactly. Utilizing products like that, I think the business development pipeline is vital. Personally, I think there's an overly romanticized view of entrepreneurship, that you throw an MVP together and a cool pitch deck and you're going to go out and raise $10 million of early stage funding, and you don't ever need to actually acquire customers at a small scale and validate your product and things of that nature. I think that's a great space for government to fall into, because a lot of these 25 and 10K procurement thresholds don't require as much scrutiny because they're considered lower dollar numbers. And the government entity can be more flexible with those amounts to try and do these hackathons. I think Jen's here, Jen Wheelhan. Hey, Jen. So Jennifer holds hackathons on behalf of the county, and they've gotten a lot of really cool apps that have come out of that.
Great, that's happening on the county level.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
it's happening on the broader scale. And
in fairness to Mayor Buckhorn, he did do a city hackathon.
I wasn't trying to. That's not what I was trying to say,
But it's
Linda.
the whole community.
Yeah, it's our entire community is doing hackathons at the public level. But I feel like more of that and then more specificity. So maybe coming to the table and saying, this is the specific problem we want to try and solve. And we're going to do one of these a month, and here's how much funding is available throughout the course of the year. I know that there's a long path to that happening, but maybe if a bunch of us start raising hell, it can be an expedited path.
But I think he's onto something. And the reason I bring up, the mayor's hackathon and these other hackathons, which are great, but to your point, they aren't always very consistently done. And it's because a lot of these things are kind of mostly run by volunteers, and there's a little bit of support, admin staff, but unless you kind of bake it into the infrastructure of the city and the county government of some sort, where it's a commitment, right? There's a commitment to making that data available and making sure there's access for the entrepreneurs and innovators to do something with it. You can make it open, but if you don't have
Everything around them has to be prioritized.
Right.
100%.
Well, and there's in that kind of challenge around hackathons. There's some cool models that are emerging and some cool companies that are coming up to fill that space, because data is the new gold. I heard that the other day. I'm like, absolutely, that's exactly right. And everything that is inanimate can be a data collection source. I was at a conference with the U.S. Postal System, and the Chief Innovation Officer is saying, you know what, we can solve transportation because we have postal carriers on every single street across the country, and all we have to do is put a sensor on those things, and we can collect whatever data we need to, and it's all encrypted, and it's not scary, and there's very smart people looking at the privacy and security piece of that. I'm not trying to be glib about that. It's incredibly important. But there's opportunities to collect data, and not that that's easy to do, but I know that the U.S. Postal System is working on that. So, you know, it's important with smart cities to think about all of the invisible things that make all of this work. And, you know, you can see a sensor, you can see a cell phone, you can see all these physical objects, but it's the data that's stored in the cloud and how it's secured and how it's managed and how it's processed and how it's used and then how it's communicated. That's the 4G, 5G, small cell conversation. All of this doesn't happen without the champions being educated, without you all being educated, and you all are the champions too. I just haven't heard from you yet, but there's still a microphone in the middle of the room, to talk about these things and to make sure that the policies are in place to make that world a reality. Because again, in 4 or 5 years, we will live in the world of IoT and the Internet of Things and the world of 5G. That will be the reality. Do you agree? Yeah, it's happening. It might be shorter than 5 years, but the only thing that's holding it back is the policies in place that make that world a reality. So I just really want to make that point, and thanks for all of your input. Yeah.
So, Dr. White, you mentioned in the white paper 2 of the problems that you identified was a lack of experienced CEOs and a lack of funding, and that's kind of like a cat and mouse game. You know, the CEOs aren't going to come if there's no funding, and the funding's not going to come if there's no experienced CEOs. What role do you see government policy and smart cities potentially playing in solving that kind of cat and mouse game?
What a cool question. Thank you.
Customers.
Great question. Thank you. You know, I think, and I welcome all of my other fellow panelists to answer that. I think, you know, part of it is back to something Ned said earlier. Not every company needs funding, so we have to help our companies because this may be real or it may be perceived that companies need funding. So we're still trying to vet that out. I know there are companies that need funding, and I know we do lose some companies that need funding, but we need to make sure we address the issue of helping them get customers first. So that's one issue. And back to what I said earlier, my next area of interest in research is really understanding the deal makers. There's been a lot of research that's been done on looking at smart and successful entrepreneurial ecosystems, and they've identified this connectivity among the deal makers. And if you go somewhere like Silicon Valley, or you go somewhere like Austin, or even if you go into some of the newer cities like Pittsburgh or Nashville, where you're seeing some other things happening, what you find is that they're very connected, and there's a handful of deal makers. And deal makers fall into the definition of a deal maker in this case is somebody that's either started 3+ ventures, I think it's 3.2 ventures. They've either invested in 3.2 ventures or they've helped facilitate it in some other really meaningful way, you know, mostly through a strategic partnership or something like that. So there is an algorithm that's been developed by some folks out of the Research Triangle area to actually flesh all this out. And so we are in the early stages of working with them to use this deal-maker methodology to study the Tampa Bay SMSA, and I think, you know, Stan's here, we'll add on Sarasota and Manatee counties as well, and try to understand whether or not we actually are lacking, you know, these people that can connect to money, or whether or not they're just sort of hidden and we just need to get them engaged. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg, but being a researcher and a scientist, you know, by training, my goal is to bring some of the data forward, and then hopefully we can collectively look at it and kind of see what we can do. On the CEO side, I think, you know, education is one piece of it, but also trying to get these companies scaled. So again, that takes money, but, you know, it's not an overnight thing. But I don't know if that answered your question. So.
There are also some really smart ways that governments are involved in funds themselves. where they're still privately led or they match private commitments. And so you can look at a variety of models. You could look up Launch Tennessee, provides at a state level a fund that matches private investment dollars, what they did at Jumpstart in Ohio. And now what they're doing with Firespring Fund in Orlando, which is a cool model as well. The governments are involved in that. They're not leading it, but they're supporting it. And I think that's the appropriate kind of role.
Yeah, I didn't. I think you asked about government and that, and I really didn't address that. But when I was in Kentucky, they had a really strong program, and then Ohio did as well. Third Frontier, and I can't remember, but they actually used state money and put it in Kentucky. It was run by the Kentucky Science and Technology Corp, and they actually were a nonprofit group that supported innovation in Kentucky. And so you could apply for grants, and they were everything from $50,000 startup grants to, I think the highest were like $400,000 investments to attract CEO talent. So that's actually a better answer maybe than my first one. But I think governments can help. It's still got, in my mind, it's still got to be about the entrepreneur. So I'm really dedicated to keeping them first and foremost. And I think these government programs, though, there's a lot of good examples out there.
Yes, question.
Hi, my name is Norma Henning. I also wear a few hats. I'm a lawyer that represents mostly foreign startups coming to the United States, and I also represent the Federal Republic of Germany here in Tampa. I drive up and down Florida, all over Florida, and involved in economic development. And I was wondering, there are incubators and accelerators in this state that have partnerships with foreign accelerators and incubators. And I also think this is great because we can, connect the resources that are available in Tampa Bay. Like I didn't know a lot of, I've been here for a few years and I didn't know a lot what you talked about today.
Awesome.
So is there a program for like maybe soft landing for foreign companies that come here? Or would you want to build one? I mean, so.
Get started here, folks.
Would you want to build one?
Yeah.
We have the IDBA here, who is, they actually certify people in doing soft landings. They're headquartered in Orlando.
Huh?
And the UCF incubator system is a soft landing accredited program. I think the USF incubator, I'm not sure if it's got a soft landing
I don't
designation
think-
yet or not, but right in this state, we have the international organization that
But is there something in Tampa? Then
it's in Orlando.
in Orlando, okay. What?
Something else is the Florida.
It's definitely an issue. The comment I was just going to comment on that because we get a lot of students that come through here that start companies, and I know there's been some effort to figure out how we can keep them here, and there are some programs that are trying to work with universities, and it's something I have a real interest in because we do lose a lot of our talent back to their native countries, even though they would like to stay here and build their company. Because what we found is that when students come here to Tampa or any other city and they build their entrepreneurial ecosystem here, they lose a lot when they go back to their home, whether we're talking going to New York or going back to Germany or France or Finland for Nellie, they lose a lot of that. So it's definitely an issue. And I think maybe Stan and I need to talk a little bit more too, because we've talked to a few groups, but I don't know of anything here, particularly in Tampa. Does anybody else? I don't think
Closest I can think is the Florida Israeli Business Accelerator.
They have that partnership,
right?
yeah.
But they're specifically working with Israeli startups.
Yeah.
But that's the
But
only
I
one
don't
can
know
think
of anybody
local.
that's got a program. The one program we were looking at would enable an entrepreneur to stay and get an H-1B visa by working with a university as a entrepreneur in residence. And part-time they would work, and then part-time they could work on their company. Mm-hmm. But it requires funding to do that, and so that was part of that. We actually talked about trying to see if we could put something like that together because, we've had some issues with students that we're losing. And
Well, the partnerships that I'm familiar with are in Collier County, and of course there's a lot of angel funding money in Collier County, but they basically have a partnership with a French incubator, and they come over and there's a lot of exchange going on.
So they're actually already they've got a business over there and they're coming over and exchanging.
Yes, they're not at the student
yeah.
level, they're at the entrepreneur level when they have a product that they would like to develop for the U.S.
We
market.
do have something similar to that with, several of the universities, I think, have some partnerships like that. But I was thinking more about how we can keep international students here that want to start companies once they finish.
When creating the marketplace, which I think is some of what you're asking about, is incredibly important. One of the most, I think, exciting IoT startups is actually out of Hamburg, Germany. I was there just in September of last year. It's called Nuvel, and it's a cart that connects, it's an Internet of Things play, to a bike or to some other transportation unit. And it can actually power the bike, so it's not connected by a tether, even though that's an option. And it was created by university students at the University of Hamburg who were seeing different delivery trucks trying to drive around in the city and not being able to do that effectively or efficiently. So they literally created a cart, and it's not easy to create hardware, connected it, and now they're, I think, being acquired by Audi, or Audi is one of their main investors. So I think that's incredibly exciting, and that's a technology that could be leveraged in any city in the world, and that's just one example of probably thousands. So I do want to be conscious of time, even though I'm a little bummed because I could literally just sit up here for hours and listen to you all and keep the conversation going. But I hope the conversation does keep going. You know, it's my job to bring kind of what I'm seeing happening around the world and what I'm seeing happening around the U.S. and championing cities that are really ahead of the curve. And, you know, I could kind of be the angry citizen / resident on the sideline, like shaking my fist saying, why don't you cities get it? And instead, what I'd like to do is just point to the cities that do and use you all and leverage you all as an example, and hopefully inspire other communities to do what is already so naturally happening, not without hard work, not without a lot of effort. But thank you. Thank you for hosting me here, and thank you to our amazing panelists. I've learned so much from you, and I'm just really grateful for your efforts and for sharing your time. Any closing thoughts that we want to do before we wrap up?
I would just say that if you want your city to be a smart city, you might have to show up to a city council meeting.
Right.
You might have to do a little lobbying. You might have to get out there and engage in the civic process. And so that would be my big takeaway, is that you can't just be in your silo. You do have to get involved as an active citizen and entrepreneur.
If I can piggyback off of that, I often, when I get on my soapbox talking about having an innovation-based economy in the region, I say, you know, you can't just put the burden of that responsibility solely on the shoulders of the entrepreneurs and the investors in the community.
Right.
Every citizen in the community can play a role in making sure you have a vibrant, innovation-based economy. And it can even start with taking a chance with some of these startups by being a customer, or user, tester, advisor. You know, when you start investing in the community, then you are a part of that solution. If you want a digital city, a smart city, right? Same thing. You need to be part of investing and making sure that our city has this, and not just solely wait on, you know, City Hall to figure it out for you.
There is no waiting. Anyone else? Want to do some closing thoughts?
I just want to thank you for coming here and sharing in our story, and I hope you'll help tell it outside of Tampa.
It's my pleasure. My
Thank you,
absolute
Chelsea.
pleasure. No, thank you.
Thank you all for coming today.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.